Hey guys, last Thursday, Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota filed a new bill in the Senate called the Substance Regulation and Safety Act, proposing that recreational cannabis is effectively legalized federally by ultimately aiming for cannabis to be taxed and regulated in a similar manner in which the U.S. already does for tobacco products. Under this proposal, cannabis would no longer be listed as a controlled substance in the U.S., and it would involve tapping various federal government departments for a comprehensive control approach. The National Institutes of Health would create a new research institute specifically for cannabis in medicine. The Department of Agriculture would be tasked with imposing quality control standards and testing for consistent THC concentrations for cannabis products. The Department of Transportation would be in charge of finding ways to detect THC impaired driving. The Department of Health and Human Services would create public health and educational campaigns and informing young people about the risks associated with cannabis use and would place a higher emphasis on vaping concentrates. The minimum age for sales and purchases through a dispensary would be 21. The House of Representatives passed an amendment to protect all state, territory, and tribal cannabis programs from Justice Department interference in a vote of 254 to 163. The amendment, titled Amendment 87 Part B, states that the Department of Justice cannot use funds in order to enforce federal cannabis laws in states in which recreational and medicinal dispensaries are already legal and protected. This is essentially an enforcement of the Cole Memorandum put in place by the Obama administration in 2013, which sought to prioritize state cannabis rights by protecting dispensaries from federal authority raids and punishment. A new Louisiana law significantly expanding the state's medicinal cannabis program officially took effect over the weekend. The legislation will allow physicians to recommend medicinal cannabis to patients for any debilitating condition that it deems fit. The expansion bill, as introduced by its sponsor, Representative Larry Bagley, initially only would have added traumatic brain injuries and concussions, but was amended in the committee to include several other conditions, as well as language stipulating that cannabis can be recommended for any malady that a physician considers debilitating to an individual patient. Over the past few days, a few new pieces of cannabis-related research came out. A survey compiled by the diagnostics company HealthStreet polled 597 people for information on their experiences regarding cannabis use and pre-employment drug testing. 51% of those who responded said that they were required to take a pre-employment drug test upon receiving a job offer throughout the past year. The majority also abstained from cannabis for at least 2 weeks before they knew their drug test was coming up, 35% of whom abstained for cannabis for at least a month. What's interesting is that nearly 30% said that they had used cannabis immediately following their drug test or the day after, and that a total of 57% waited no more than a week after taking the test to use cannabis again. A new study by the Journal of Integrative Medicine showed that 94% of test subjects who used cannabis for migraine-related headaches and pain felt immediate pain relief within 2 hours of using it. The study involved 699 people who used the Relief app that allowed test subjects to record at real time when they experienced headache or migraine-related pain episodes. The study involved using a 0 to 10 pain scale for measuring pain intensity. In test subjects, the relative levels of self-reported pain dropped by 3.3 points within that 0 to 10 scale. One big predictor in success for relieving pain with cannabis was that THC concentrations of the product used had at least 10% concentration, and that indica strains were associated with statistically significant more pain relief than sativa strains. The drop in pain in the 0 to 10 scale also tended to be bigger in younger people. A different study suggested that women who use cannabis more than 3 times per week reported higher sexual satisfaction and functioning than women who used it 3 times or fewer per week. The Female Sexual Function Index is a 19-question survey designed to assess and monitor sexual function and satisfaction in women. While there has long been anecdotal evidence that cannabis use can lead to a more satisfying sex life, 452 women took the survey in a dispensary and found that those who used cannabis more than 3 times a week reported a significantly higher SFI score than those who use it 3 times or fewer per week, and that incremental increases in cannabis use frequency by 1 day was also associated with improved SFSI scores across the subdomains of desire, arousal, orgasm, and satisfaction. Researchers suggested that the endocannabinoid receptors are directly involved with sexual function, and that cannabis's ability to reduce anxiety may also be a factor. Decriminalize Nature submitted a proposal to Oakland City Council member Noel DeGaio to allow for the launch of a 2-year pilot program that would legalize the use of psychedelics for healing ceremonies. The program is specifically targeted towards vulnerable populations, as the text of the proposal cites concern that for-profit corporations are becoming the dominant gatekeeper for psychedelic therapies. Oakland City Council would be responsible for certifying that facilitators of the ceremonies be recommended by a participating community-based organization and have at least 5 years of facilitator experience and facilitating research of the ceremony's effect on participants' mental health and reporting on the results once the 2-year pilot program has been completed. Decriminalize Nature is aiming for City Council to approve the proposal by October. According to new data from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, EMS responses for drug overdoses from April through June of this year were up 26% from the same period in 2019. In just the period of April and May of this year, EMS responses for overdoses rose by 33%. The increase in overdoses were consistent throughout the state and in most demographic groups, except for those ages 65 and older. The newly released numbers also reveal that opioid overdose patients are now more likely to refuse EMS transport to a hospital than they were last year. Between April and June of last year, 7.7% of opioid overdose patients declined the transport to a hospital. This year, in that same time, it was up to 14.3%. A 46-year-old doctor was arrested and charged with conspiring to commit healthcare fraud and wire fraud for his alleged participation in a massive years-long healthcare fraud scheme throughout Palm Beach, California. Dr. Michael J. Ligotti of Delray Beach is accused of filing for fake tests and treatments for vulnerable patients seeking treatment for drug and or alcohol addiction. From May of 2011 through March 2020, private insurance companies and Medicare were fraudulently billed for nearly $681 million for laboratory testing claims for which they paid already $121 million. Dr. Ligotti owned and operated Ho Health in Delray Beach, which was a private clinic that offered addiction treatment, family care, and urgent care. He hired laboratories that paid him kickbacks to the sober homes or addiction treatment facilities, according to the complaint. In exchange for signing these orders, Ligotti required the facilities to have their patients treated by Ho Health and his staff, which allowed him to bill hundreds of millions of dollars in additional fake treatments, including unnecessary and expensive urine analysis tests, costly blood tests, non-existent therapy sessions, office visits, and other unnecessary and excess services. According to the criminal complaint, Ligotti didn't review the results of the tests he ordered or the results to treat those patients. Some patients allegedly were billed between $10,000 and up to $20,000 by Ligotti and Ho Health for a single day's visit. A study published this week in the journal Pharmacoepidemiology and Drug Safety analyzed nearly 550,000 suicide-related calls to poison control centers that mentioned over-the-counter painkillers. Those between ages 6 and 19 years old accounted for nearly half of the incidents, and women accounted for about 73% of them. Suicide-related incidents involving over-the-counter painkillers increased by 34% between 2000 and 2018. The National Center for Health Statistics partnered with the Census Bureau on an experimental data system called the Household Pulse Survey. This 20-minute online survey was designed to complement the ability of the federal statistical system to rapidly respond and provide relevant information about the impact of the coronavirus pandemic in the U.S. at real time. The first 12 weeks worth of data was published to determine the self-reported symptoms of anxiety and depression within various groups and age groups. The most heavily reported age groups for anxiety or depressive disorder symptoms, both before and during the pandemic, are in those ages 18 to 29 and 30 to 39. Nearly 42% of 18 to 29-year-olds reported symptoms of depression and nearly 47% reported symptoms of anxiety. These prevalence rates tended to steadily drop as the subjects got older, but with the exception of those ages 80 plus, increases in anxiety and depression were present across the board. Lastly, The database NPS Discovery, which tracks reports of detections of new novel psychoactive substances from drug seizures and toxicology reports, issued the second quarter report for 2020, which shows the extent to which how quickly the drug supplies have been changing and morphing amid the pandemic. NPS Discovery reported that between March to June, 10 new benzodiazepines have been detected in drug or toxicology samples. Most notably, the benzodiazepine analog etizolam most frequently appeared mixed with fentanyl, cocaine, and/or methamphetamine, underscoring the unpredictability of drug combinations found in any given bag of dope that could be imminent inducers of overdoses. 10 new opioids have also been detected in samples seized by the DEA or toxicology reports, mainly various new forms of the analogs in fentanyl. The most commonly detected new opioid has been isotinidazine, for which the Department of Health for Milwaukee, Wisconsin had to issue an overdose spike last week. And while there hasn't been many new reports and detections about new stimulants and hallucinogens, that category has seen the most new novel substances, with 19 new hallucinogens and stimulants entering the market. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, you can email us at alldrugnews@gmail.com or direct message us on Instagram at AllDrugNews. Thanks, guys. See you next time.